Welcome inside the second floor of the Duncan Student Center. Austin Rooney, Caroline Pineda, Ellen Geyer. We're glad to have you with us, and it is time for Shamrock Sports. So first, a quick word. We got USC this weekend. Big weekend.
Yeah, I think coming off Bowling Green, pretty much exactly what we expected. So now the Irish are going to have more of a test this week against Southern Cal.
First shutout since 2014. That's what I like to see.
Shamrock Sports is next. Let's do it.
Hello, I'm Father John Jenkins, President of the University of Notre Dame, and thank you for watching Shamrock Sports.
On 3rd and 8, drops back, the Irish bring 5. Thrown to the left, intercepted. Kyle Hamilton will go. Touchdown, Notre Dame. 1st and 10 from their own 42. They give to around the right side on the reverse. Running free. The 10, the 5. Touchdown, Notre Dame. Touchdown, Notre Dame. This is going to be a touchdown. Touchdown, Chris Fink. Touchdown, Notre Dame.
Back inside the second floor of the Duncan Student Center for Shamrock Sports. As let's jump into this last matchup against Bowling Green. The Fighting Irish with a dominant performance. Not that it was maybe unexpected because they were facing off against Brian Van Gorder and company, but still a
But he had a great story,
He
Austin.
does
Isn't
have
that
a
what
good
you
story.
said?
He had a great story. We can jump into that again sometime soon. But 52-0. It's a dominant performance from the Irish. Let's start with that.
Yeah, definitely, I think, as I said, what we expected to see in this one. Nothing really surprised me too much, especially not from the starters. The only thing that did surprise me is how long they were in. Leaving them until the end of the third quarter was maybe not what I thought was going to happen there, especially with a commanding lead going into the half. But I liked what I saw from Book. I thought he played a clean game. Thought he did everything we expected him to do. Defense, kind of the same thing. So about what I expected.
I mean, something I liked was that Notre Dame traditionally is not a program that puts up style points like that, but to see them rout Bowling Green in such a commanding fashion, covering the 45.5-point spread, I mean, honestly, if you're Brian Kelly, what more can you ask for? Ian Book really looked back like his old self from last year. I thought our run game can always use work, but I thought the receivers looked good, tight ends looked good, the defense looked good as always. So I don't know what more you could want from that game.
And we'll talk about style points in a minute, but let's talk a little bit about some of the guys who stayed in until the second half.
Yeah.
Ian Book had a good game. He was 16 for 20. Phil Jurgenman came in. He threw 7 passes. We had the over-under last week at 6.5. Just over
Barely
at
over.
7. 5 for 7 for Phil Jurgenman. Pretty good game for the backup quarterback. And the offense was clicking all the way through. But the question I got for you, Caroline, did the Irish keep in their starters for a little too long?
I mean, I think it wasn't to the point where I think it was that bad. I was a little surprised. I thought they would come out closer to the beginning of the third quarter because you do then get to the point where, up that much, do you need them in where they could get hurt? Because what if Book had gotten hurt at that point? And then your whole season's changed, and you haven't really given Dracovic enough of the reps that he would need to, I don't think, take that on so soon. So you want to get him those reps, and you want to get him enough of those reps. I would have liked to see more from him than we did see, but he also broke 40 yards rushing, so that was another positive point, and he did a couple different things. So I liked what we saw from the younger quarterback there, but I did think maybe left Book in a little bit too long, but glad to see him out by the end of the third.
Yeah, and going back to Dracovic, I think he was like the second highest rusher on the team with maybe two carries for 40 yards, something like that. I definitely think those starters were left in too long. I mean, if you're Ian Book, you can't afford to get hurt. Like we won't have a season without him. God bless Phil Jurgenbeck, but he's not Ian Book. So I think leaving in the starters too long. If you think about it like any other sport, like in the NBA, like you don't leave LeBron in the fourth quarter when you're beating the Pistons by 40 points. So you don't leave Ian Book in the third quarter when you're beating Bowling Green by 4 touchdowns.
And it was interesting, though, an unfamiliar situation for the Irish because we've talked about the Tua syndrome where Tua never plays in the fourth quarter, and now Jalen Hurts and some of these really elite quarterbacks not seeing action in the fourth quarter. But even against UNM, Book was in longer than I would have expected in that one. And that, I mean, partially I think because it's the season opener, and he does need those reps to get himself back in the swing of things, I think, in that home opener, I should say, not season opener, home opener. But kind of getting back in the feel of things, maybe leaving him in longer than you would. Now, mid-season, though, you can't afford, like you said, Ellen, to have him get hurt. So I do think kind of leaving him in too long. But, it's interesting that Notre Dame is now in the position to do that, and it was interesting to see how Kelly handled that when Notre Dame's not typically a program that needs to worry, like you said, about racking up those style of points and then bringing in the second string.
A player we haven't yet talked about on that first team is starting running back for the Fighting Irish, Tony Jones Jr. Had another good game, 102 yards on just 7 carries for the senior. The question mark for him, A, did he stay in too long too, but B, is he really finally turning that corner to be a good running back in college football?
I just think that Notre Dame's ground game is not at all what I expected. And I attribute a lot of that to, one, the loss of Dexter Williams, and two, the loss of Jafar Armstrong to injury. I think that I definitely anticipated that it would be one of their strengths coming into the season, and it really hasn't been. Tony Jones has been fine. He hasn't stood out to me. I think it was nice to see him work out the kinks a little bit last week, but 7 carries, I don't know. I'd like to see the ball more in his hands and have him be a little bit more efficient when he does get it.
I do think he answered all the questions I would have wanted to see answered in this specific matchup. The bigger question now is going to be USC, because this is, a better opponent, obviously, than Bowling Green. The question is going to be, can he do more against a better defense than Brian Van Gorders? And so we'll have to see, and that's something that I think he'll have the chance to answer in this game, and then moving forward, kind of answer that question a little bit into Michigan, which is obviously even, I think, a better defense than USC's is going to be.
I really hope Brian Van Gorder doesn't watch our show, because I think we've been throwing maybe a little bit too much shade.
Well, I think it'd be happy to see that Rudy was very proud of his story.
Story last week.
So
he did.
Credit where credit is
Coming
due.
from high school. Yeah.
Assistant coach from high school, made all the way
Yeah.
to the NFL. I would like to change the focus a little bit to something we talked about earlier with style points.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the college football playoff and all those implications in a little bit. But let's talk about that. Do the Irish need to rack up big points against these opponents left on their schedule if they're going to make a run at trying to get into the college football?
Absolutely. Not a question about it. You look at the other teams that are doing that. I mean, Alabama, if they weren't beating some of these pretty poor opponents that they're playing by as much as they're beating them by, it wouldn't be as much of a conversation. It would just be a win. But it always goes for Alabama with that resounding win. And same with some of these other teams. And Notre Dame needs that.
Yeah, you saw what happened with Clemson when they didn't have that resounding win over UNC. They dropped to second in the rankings.
Right. So exactly, when Notre Dame goes up against some of these teams, if Notre Dame had skidded by and barely beat Bowling Green, you don't think we'd have a different conversation right now? So yes, I mean, Notre Dame does need the style points, even if they hadn't covered the spread. Yes, because when the spread is set at 45, you have to cover the spread. I mean, against a team like that, you have to show that you can do better than people are expecting you to do, because keep in mind, this is a team that Kent State put up 62 against. So if Notre Dame doesn't cover that spread, that's not good for a team that's trying to make a case for themselves at the end of the season. And whether that's the playoff or whether that's just a good bowl game, those would be two different, like a New Year's Six. That would be two different conversations. But the fact is that Notre Dame now is in a position where not controlling its own destiny completely does mean that style points all factor in.
Yes, and I think going off of that, something important to consider is that Notre Dame is independent. So if we're going to go up at the end of the season against these one-loss conference champions, we need the style points that they're, like teams like Ohio State. If Ohio State is a one-loss team and we're a one-loss team, Ohio State's going to get in. Like, that's the fact of the matter. Same thing with Oklahoma. Any of these teams who win their conference championship.
There may be an exception for Oklahoma. Get into that
But
later.
but any of these teams who pick up a loss but win their conference championship, I think they're shooing for the playoff, especially over a one-loss team like us.
It's definitely hard to make the argument that a one-loss Power 5 conference champ shouldn't be in the playoff and then an independent team should. But keep going.
Well, let's talk. We talked a lot about the first team. Let's talk a little bit about the second team now. We got an opportunity to see Villager Kovic. We saw a little bit more from Sibo Flemister. This team has seen some of their second team players come in now and actually get real reps later in these games. So what did you see? Let's start with Villager Kovic. Is he a quarterback who could lead the Fighting Irish down the road?
I definitely didn't anticipate him to get to throw the ball as much as he did. I thought he was just going to be handing the ball off to like Sibo Flemister, any one of these running backs that they're getting in to get the reps. I like to see him have that opportunity. I think he did a great job. I mean, a touchdown pass, there's not enough that you can say for that, especially with a guy who's really not been getting time at all. Even last year when he got in, it was throwaway minutes and he didn't get to throw it at all. So I think it's great to see him kind of stepping into his role. I thought he looked a lot more mature than we've seen him. I thought he looked very poised on the field, and I thought it was really nice to see just some of these second-string guys getting minutes. Sibo Flemister, I think, 8 carries. Even guys like Mick Asaf, who don't really get that many minutes, getting them in. I think that was key in giving your guys some rest.
Yeah, I agree.
Flemister, 8 carries, 30 yards, and a touchdown behind the starting running back Tony Jones Jr. 7 carries. We talked about over 100 yards for the senior. So one other point I'd like to talk about now is some of the other running backs. Where does Sibo Flemister now fit into this mix? Jafar Armstrong coming back this week for the Fighting Irish. Is he and some of the other running backs we've seen throughout the year, are they going to play a role, or is it the Jafar Armstrong and Tony Jones Jr. show at this point?
I mean, to me, Flemister was one of those guys who was getting Notre Dame to the point where Armstrong could come back. I think it was kind of the mentality of who can come in and play enough of a role that we have guys other than just Tony Jones who can come in and try to get us more yards and get us to the point where Armstrong is back. So if he comes back and if he's able to return to what I think Notre Dame anticipates he'll be able to do, to have that kind of dynamic duo with him and Tony Jones Jr., I don't think Flemister is going to be needed because you're going to have the two of them and they play off well against each other. And we talked about how Tony Jones is a different style running back than he has been before. He's better on his feet. He can cut better. And he's made a lot of those improvements, but Armstrong still has a different style than he does. So I think when you have their two different styles, you can use them in different ways. I don't think you really have that much of a need for that running back depth that you've had without Armstrong.
But I will say that we haven't really seen Jafar Armstrong play that much. Last year he got hurt at the beginning of the season. This year he got hurt at the beginning of the season. He's one of these guys that has had flashes of brilliance, and we assume that when he steps up to the plate, he's going to be able to do a great job. But honestly, we don't really know.
But I think it'd be a different question if Flemister had established himself as this great running back in the meantime. I think we'd be having a different conversation. But Flemister, to me, hasn't done enough that would say that he should be. I wouldn't expect him better than Armstrong now.
I would say it's Jafar's role to lose.
So you put him over Tony Jones Jr. He's number 1 running back.
Yes.
Caroline, number 1 running back?
I mean, I would say Tony Jones Jr. has done enough that that's still his spot right now. But I think it will be an interesting battle with him and Armstrong. But I think it is exclusively him and Armstrong. And none of these other guys, Flemister, has done anything to set themselves into this contention between Armstrong and Tony Jones Jr.
Let's talk a little bit more about this Bowling Green game before we move on. Do you have one major takeaway from this game? Specifically, I'd like to talk about the receiving core for Notre Dame from this Bowling Green game. Book had 5 touchdowns. Ellen, starting with you, what's your number 1 takeaway from the past game with Miami?
I think something we've been looking for all season is that connection between Book and Claypool, and I think we finally got it. Ian Book with 5 touchdown passes in the first half. Obviously, not all of those went to Claypool, but Claypool just looked so athletic, and he really did a nice job of extending himself down the line, getting open. I mean, it's obviously easy to break away from the Bowling Green secondary, but I thought he did a really nice job establishing that connection, and hopefully that's something we can see going forward because it's something we're going to need to see.
To me, it's the tight ends. You saw Brock Wright, Tommy Tremble, and Cole Kmet seeing targets in this game. So that was a big question mark, I think, is Cole Kmet obviously has started out the season very, very well. Kelly's trying to use the tight ends more, but you can't only
He loves the tight ends.
He loves the tight ends all of a sudden, which is great because I love tight end plays. But so now you see him involving Wright and Tremble, and I like that because if you have a trio of tight ends that can come in and be those guys either blocking or receiving, it adds a new element to your offense, and it's something that Kelly's going to need going down the stretch, especially against USC and Michigan.
Any thoughts on Chris Fink from last week's game?
1 for 24, right? I wish we would get the ball to Chris Fink's hands more. I think for those shallow crossing routes, there's nobody that can do it as quickly and as well as he can. I think he has really solid execution, and we've seen the catches he's been able to make in the past. So I think we need to look for him a little bit more coming through the middle with the shallow crossing routes, but I guess we'll see.
I will say it does make me a little bit nervous with him, though, due to his size. And with Book having some issues with accuracy on some of these plays. I mean, that does
That's a very nice way to put it.
So when you're going up against a good secondary, that does kind of make me nervous. A good defense might have the ability to pick some of these plays off, and Fink to me is not really going to be that dominant receiver that can really fight for it. So
but he's
if
shifty,
he's open,
he's tricky,
great,
and I think he can slip through the cracks.
But to me, he's not like the Claypool guy that you can trust, throw it up and he'll come down with it. Fink is not that kind of receiver. So if Book can get it to him, great, but it is a little bit riskier than some of those Claypool plays are going to be.
Well, Notre Dame did not have a particularly tough matchup with Bowling Green last weekend, but there were some good games around college football, and with more on those matchups, let's set it down to Kieran Cantwell.
Thanks, Austin. I'm Kieran Cantwell, here to give you a midseason update on the college football playoff picture. At number 9, Notre Dame enters this week as the highest-ranked one-loss team in the AP poll. Let's take a quick look at the first 8 teams. Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and Florida are all high-ranked contenders coming out of the SEC. Sitting atop the rankings, Alabama has not won by a margin less than 24 points all year. Led by Heisman favorite Tua Tagovailoa, the Crimson Tide will likely once again be in the thick of the playoff conversation by the end of the year. Only 2 spots behind Alabama, at number 3, the Georgia Bulldogs already have a marquee win over Notre Dame. It will be interesting to see if their swarming defense and impressive running game can keep them out of the loss column throughout the rigorous conference schedule. 5th-ranked LSU and 7th-ranked Florida play each other this week, the Gators coming off a huge statement win over Auburn last Saturday. LSU has already shown its newfound offensive firepower under quarterback Joe Burrow with a win at highly ranked Texas earlier this year. This top 10 matchup is of immense importance, as the winner will add another notable victory toward its playoff push, while the loser will have much ground to cover in the second half of the season. Now we'll scan the Big Ten, where number 3 Ohio State and number 8 Wisconsin currently reside. Ohio State has consistently blown out every team it has taken the field with so far in 2019. Transfer dual-threat quarterback Justin Fields has looked dynamic in the explosive Buckeye offense, leading Ohio State to an FBS best 40.5-point margin of victory. Not far behind at 37.6 points is Wisconsin, giving them second in that category. After 2 weeks of unranked matchups for both teams, the Badgers travel to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes in a battle for supremacy of the Big Ten. The other two teams inside the top 8 are second-ranked Clemson and sixth-ranked Oklahoma. Clemson recently survived a scare against North Carolina, but that should be the toughest group it faces all season long, with only one ranked team left on its schedule in Wake Forest. Behind transfer quarterback Jalen Hurts, Oklahoma's offense has picked up right where it left off last year. The Sooners face a stiff test this week, traveling to Texas for this year's edition of the Red River Rivalry. If they can survive that, the rest of their schedule should inspire confidence in a return to the playoff for Oklahoma. That's all for this week's look around college football. Now, back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks so much, Kieran. A very exciting game last weekend, especially that game between the UNC game from a couple weeks ago and some more exciting matchups with the Alabama game last week. Let's jump into some of the games this week, though. A couple of really exciting matchups coming up, one of which the OU game against Texas, the number 7 team in the country against the number 11 team in the country. And the other thing to note there, this is a battle between 2 Big 12 teams. There may only be one Big 12 team that gets into the college football playoff, if even.
One.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
even.
There's not going to be 2.
So the question is, this game very well may be an elimination game between Texas and OU.
I am so excited. I love this matchup so much. These are 2 fun teams to watch. I love the style of play. These high-scoring offenses. It's going to be so fun to watch, especially with Jalen Hurts and Sam Ehlinger, 2 elite quarterbacks going up against each other. I am so excited to see this game.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is back. We've been saying it all year. I have Texas in this game, actually. I think Sam Ehlinger is too good to let this one go. It's going to be a close matchup. It's going to be, I don't know, I think everything is moving in the right direction for Texas this year, and I think they're going to take advantage of their opportunity.
Interesting you say that, though, because I would say the same thing, that Hurts is too good to let this one go. So it'll be very interesting to see that quarterback dynamic. And 2 very talented quarterbacks. Ehlinger was not the reason that Texas lost to LSU, that one loss on the season. So if he can do more in this one to get the rest of his team going and build up that momentum to
17 TDs
overcome
to 2
Oklahoma.
picks for him this season.
Yeah,
so.
an impressive quarterback for
You
sure, but so was Hurts.
You mentioned LSU, Caroline, and the other big matchup, a top 10 matchup here for LSU as they take on Florida, a pair of undefeated teams from the SEC. And there are still 4 teams that are undefeated left from the SEC, and the question has to be, I think the loser of this game very well may find themselves on the outside of the college football playoff, and the team that wins this game has a pretty darn good chance of getting in.
I honestly just love watching the SEC destroy itself. I think it's so much fun, and that's another reason why I love that we're independent. So I think Joe Burrow is unreal. His completion rate just under 79%, I think. He's got like 22 touchdowns to 4 picks, something like that. He's an elite quarterback. I think he's one of the top 5 in college football this year. So I don't think LSU is going to let this one slip through their fingers either.
Yeah, I agree. I'd pick LSU in this one as well. I was surprised to see how well Florida played against Auburn, but I do think Auburn also kind of underperformed. Yeah. So LSU's not going to do that, and LSU's not going to make those same mistakes. So I would think that the Tigers would win this one.
Do you have one pick here who's your mortal lock for this week, a team you know is going to win? Maybe it's a matchup that's thought to be a little closer than it actually is.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that because my mortal lock's got to be LSU.
All right.
I think Joe Burrow is too good to let this one go.
Well, I'm going to go with Wisconsin beating Michigan State. So not a ranked matchup. Michigan State is not ranked, but this is also a big conference matchup for Wisconsin. And I do think this is their chance to once again prove that they are legit. And people are still kind of questioning them even with their very dominant start to the season. So Wisconsin now with another chance to prove that they do belong and that they can be in contention at the end of the season.
And Michigan State gave Ohio State a little bit of trouble
They
last
did.
week.
They're
so
not
I
a
think
bad opponent.
They certainly got something to bring to the table against Wisconsin this week.
Well, a team that we might not be focusing on because they haven't gotten much press recently, and UCF was the group of 5 undefeated team that everyone cared about for the last 2 years. But we're bringing up a new team this week. It's Boise State.
Wait, we're not going with UCF?
No.
I thought this was his typical lead.
Brandon Wimbush. Oh,
I'm shocked.
Wait, can we talk
So
about just
my-
super quick? Can we touch on the fact that Brandon Wimbush is no longer a quarterback? He's playing running back now, and he's not
So do you
starting.
still like UCF just as much?
No, well, look, UCF's out of the picture. They're 3-2.
I know.
I know. So what do you think now about UCF?
Well, no, UCF is not deserving of that chance this year. But look, this is a Boise State team that is 5-0. They're ranked 14th in the country. They take on a Hawaii team that's 4-1. I think Boise State runs away with this one. But let's jump into a couple of other looks at the college football playoff now. Who stands where? Who sits where, I should really say. Alabama's still atop the AP poll, followed by Clemson, and then you're looking at Georgia and Ohio State. So still 2 SEC teams in there At this point, is there any way that the SEC doesn't find 2 teams in the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think so. I could very easily see it to where if the Big Ten and Big 12 both put up a good candidate, and then you have an SEC team in Clemson, that those would be the 4 teams most deserving of that playoff berth. So yeah, very easily. I mean, obviously, I think Alabama so far is still the clear runaway favorite for the SEC, but Georgia making a strong case as well. So it'll be interesting to see as the season comes to a close and these teams face off against each other, especially in that conference championship, to see who comes out on top. And I think it all depends on how everyone else does around the country to see whether those 2 SEC teams will get in.
I mean, we do this every year. We try to play this guessing game of who's going to win and who's going to be left at the end of the season at the top 4. And Ohio State messed it up last year with Purdue, and Oklahoma will sometimes picks up losses. So it's funny that, like how we try to predict. I think the rankings are irrelevant until week 8 or week 9. I think very well there could be 2 SEC teams standing, but honestly, there's no way of knowing, especially depending on how the conference championship shakes
And that's why it's smart that the college football playoff rankings don't start till so late in the season. Because if you were to come out so early with them, I mean, they don't matter. The AP poll obviously still gives that kind of structure that you need, and that you're, like, when you're looking at these ranked opponents, obviously you need some poll to tell you where everyone stands, so it makes sense. But the college football playoff ranking is the one that really matters, and that's the reason it doesn't come out till later is like Ellen saying that it doesn't matter yet.
2 points. We're going to start first now with Notre Dame. Do we have a shot? I mean, right here on a Notre Dame football talk show. Do the Fighting Irish have a shot at making the college football playoff, or is it all over?
I'm sorry, absolutely not. I mean, if Notre Dame goes 12-0, maybe.
I don't think there's any. 12-0 is a maybe?
Yeah, because if I'm the college football playoff committee, fool me once, put Notre Dame in, fool me twice.
But
Notre Dame
you
is
restart
nowhere
every
near
year.
contention.
You can't take history into account.
That's what they say, but I don't think that's true at all.
I mean, well, think about it this way: if you have a win over a top 5 team in Georgia, you're trying to tell me that the Irish don't get in at 12-0. I don't know how that's even possible.
But I think that there's no way you don't take into contention the fact that last time Notre Dame was there with that same record, that if Notre Dame
take into account
Georgia,
OU that they got smacked by.
I mean, I think at some point the college football playoff committee can't leave out the same conference. A Power 5 conference with a 1-loss conference champion. Can you imagine if they were to leave out the same, say they leave the Big Ten out 3 years in a row with a 1-loss conference champ. I mean, they can't keep doing that. So at some point you do. I mean, they can say it doesn't matter.
But what's the goal
But at some
here?
point you have to put in. And that's the question: is it the 4 best teams or the 4 most deserving teams? And that's the question that over and over people go back to, because that's a completely different argument. And if you look at last season and those bubble teams, that was the differentiating factor in that was, is it the 4 best or the 4 most deserving based on resume? And it's 2 different questions.
I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but is there a need to change up the college football playoff, Ellen?
Absolutely not. I despise the idea of an 8-team playoff. I think it is one of the worst ideas in college sports, because if I'm going to the NFL, there is no way I want to add another postseason game to my resume where I might get hurt.
Can you take off a regular season game in accordance to that? Maybe make it an 11-game regular season. One of the out-of-conference games gets thrown away. I mean, a lot of these out-of-conference games are against opponents that are, Group of 5, FCS teams that these college football playoff teams.
Those games are going to be played because it's those pay-to-play games, and those are not going to go
but
away.
They don't have to play them.
That they're there. Yeah, but these programs make money. That was the thing with
the FCS opponents make money, and the lower-tier FBS. But these top-tier programs, which are the ones that really drive money in college football, they don't really get much out of it other than a win.
But I think that even though that's a very valid point, it's the same logic still applies, because I would rather, if I'm going to the NFL, I'd rather play Bowling Green than play Alabama. If I'm gonna have a 13 game season, I'd rather have 7 throwaway opponents and 6.
But Ellen, we
games.
talk about going to the NFL now. You have 16 games then at the NFL level. Okay, these are 16 teams that are all bigger and stronger than Alabama,
but this
Clemson,
is when you start
etc.
getting paid.
And Renee, you can always get hurt. I mean, you can base anything on the fact that, the risk of getting hurt. But, the fact is that that's not going to be the only factor that goes into deciding this, is, the likelihood of getting hurt and playing games around that. So, I mean, there's other things to consider. And I think the one way to go at it is, Chris and I have talked about this, Chris Frick, who will be on the second show, I've talked about, maybe the one way you could expand the playoff is to have 6 teams and have the first 2 top 2 ranked teams have a bye.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because then, Ellen, to your point, those guys that are going to play in the NFL are going to have the chance to do that. And then have the same amount of games,
I think it's
the
a very
same chance to do
slope.
that. I think so too, and I think there's no reason. Why do we even need to talk about that? Because there's no reason the playoff needs to change. Because the top 4 teams in the country are supposed to get in, and there's always going to be those teams on the bubble. I mean, there's teams on the bubble in the NCAA basketball tournament with 64 teams. There's always going to be bubble teams. That's just the nature of it.
Last question.
We can't always talk about changing it.
Last question, Caroline. Does a team like Boise State, an undefeated Group of 5 team, get in? I don't want to go too far past this. No?
Look how many talented teams you have. I mean, we're talking about Oklahoma, Texas, Wisconsin, Ohio State. There are so many teams now that
Notre Dame.
This Power 5. Notre Dame.
You really think Boise State's going to get in over Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, like, and you can't make that argument, no. But that's what we've talked about. These teams are not playing for a college football playoff berth. I mean, Boise State's not going to Hawaii saying, guys, if we win this, it's one step closer to the college football playoff.
But
they're trying to pick up a win. No.
Why not?
Because that's not the
how
goal of
it
a
works.
program like Boise State.
You think UMBC, when they beat Virginia, was thinking like, oh my gosh, we can win the national championship? No.
Honestly, I thought they could probably try to get to the Elite 8 or Sweet 16.
But it's a different goal. But like going
into
into the NCAA tournament, they're thinking like, okay, we're winning. If we can upset this team,
But
that's great. They're going home still having done that. Whereas like Virginia's objective going into that is winning a national championship. Not every program in college athletics has the same goal.
I got the last take on this. We're going to move on. I say that if you're in the FBS, you should have a chance to win the FBS. Otherwise, you don't belong in the league.
There's 300 teams, more than 300
No, there are
teams.
130 teams in FBS.
Okay, in Division I football, there are more than 300
Yeah,
teams.
but we're talking about FBS, the
Okay, still
the
over
football
100
bowl
teams,
subdivision.
though.
Anyway, that's neither here
All
nor
right,
there.
let's move on now and talk a little bit about Notre Dame's upcoming schedule. It's not a particularly difficult one, which is why the Irish don't have much of a chance at this point of getting into the college football playoff. They start, of course, tomorrow with a match up at home against USC. They followed up with their last ranked matchup of the season. It's at Michigan. How does that game seem to play out?
I mean, it's just very tough looking at it from Notre Dame's perspective. If you had asked me at the beginning of the season if one loss Notre Dame made the playoff, I would tell you yes. If you ask me now, obviously the answer is no, because we just went into that. But Notre Dame's strength of schedule has been absolutely annihilated. Michigan is not good, Stanford is not good, USC is not good. And so these programs that we thought we were going to beat in statement wins that would really like look great on our resume, it's no longer as impressive. If you beat a number 5 Michigan, that's a great win, and that maybe puts you into the playoff. If you beat a number, what are they even now?
16
like 16
right now.
Michigan?
Yeah.
I mean, you're expected to win that game. So I think that if you're Notre Dame, you just have to do what you can, but with the understanding that it's probably going to be a New Year's Six Bowl this year instead of the college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Michigan game, too, that 16 ranking. Virginia's 18 when we play them. So, I mean, now these are suddenly almost equivalent games. Going into the season, who would have said that Michigan and Virginia are going to be equivalent games? No one. And granted, one's at home, one's on the road, so that changes a little bit.
You're at the big house, too. This is a raucous environment.
One's on the road. I understand. But at the same time, like, the caliber of opponent, who would have thought that we would be talking about Virginia and Michigan almost equal? No one. So suddenly now Michigan has hurt Notre Dame by being overrated to start the season. And USC and Stanford.
Surprise, Michigan's overrated.
Harbaugh on the hot seat. But yeah, I mean, Notre Dame's opponents have hurt Notre Dame, and that's, that goes without saying.
Well, let's talk about 3 of the opponents for the Irish that aren't going to be as tough. Virginia Tech, Navy, Boston College. These are 3 consecutive games for the Irish. Do they need to blow out these opponents?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Completely. And that's what we talk about with style points. I mean, it even comes down to whether or not it's making the playoff. It doesn't matter. Notre Dame, as they approach the end of the season, whatever bowl game it's coming up to, need these quality, resounding wins that these other big programs pick up. And it's not just going to be beating these teams, but it's going to be blowing out these teams.
Yeah,
so
because that's the thing is it reflects on the state of the program. If Notre Dame can pick up statement wins and put up style points like these other teams like Alabama and Clemson can, that is the only way that they're going to reach this next tier of college football. I think that they're right underneath that level. There are 2 teams on that level, and it's Alabama and Clemson. And there's a couple teams that are floating around the second level and looking to jump up. And I think Notre Dame wants to be one of those teams. And if they want to be one of those teams that are floating towards the top, and then if they want to eventually make it to the top, they've got to put up 50, 60, 70 points on teams like Bowling Green and Ball State and all these opponents that they play.
Yeah, do you think Notre Dame could make that jump? Because we've talked about that before, and I think Georgia's the only team that in the next year or 2 could be on that level with Alabama and Clemson. Would you agree?
I just think that the nature of the program of Notre Dame is not conducive to that, but we'll have to see what Kelly brings to the table.
Well, the Fighting Irish have a big-time matchup with USC tomorrow, and with more on this matchup, we'll send it down to Charlie McFadden.
Hi, I'm Charlie McFadden, and here are the 3 keys to Notre Dame's matchup versus USC on Saturday night. 1. Prevent the big play. The Trojans enter the game as a lower-tier rush offense, ranking 76th in the nation for rushing yards per game with 137. This season, they have made their living in the pass game, with versatile receivers Michael Pittman Jr., Tyler Vaughns, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. If the Irish want to shut down all facets of the Southern Cal offense, they'll have to prevent the big plays in the pass game, which can swing momentum. 2. Bring pressure. Trojan freshman quarterback Caden Slovis is playing in just his 6th college football game this weekend, and he has already thrown 4 interceptions. The front 7 for the Irish can capitalize on Slovis's inexperience by forcing him out of the pocket and putting him into uncomfortable situations with different blitz packages. The combination of putting increased pressure on Slovis, coupled with the low temperatures predicted for Saturday night, could make for an impressive defensive showing for the Irish D. 3. Force mental mistakes. The Trojans have struggled this season with keeping the yellow flags off of the field. They rank 34th in most penalties per game at 7.2 as compared to the Irish, who average 6.5. This could end up being a fatal flaw for Southern Cal this Saturday, as a night game in South Bend always comes along with a rowdy Notre Dame fan base. If the Irish hope to demoralize the Trojans early, they'll need to cause chaos on the field. And off the field, of course, they'll need to wear green. Now back to you.
Thanks so much, Charlie, as the Fighting Irish just one day away from a really big-time matchup against
Irish wear green?
It is Irish wear green
game?
day. Are you going to be both wearing green for the matchup?
I'm going to be there. I'm going to be working, so I'm not going to be wearing green.
Oh,
But
I will not
man.
either be in green. I'll also be working. Ellen, are you going to be in
What?
green at
Neither of
least?
you are even going to be wearing your green
We'd be
WBA5
neutrals.
polos? All right.
We're neutral.
Yes, I will be wearing green. I'll be wearing the maximum amount of green, if anyone's
Good.
wondering.
All right.
Good.
Well,
Face
that's-
paint?
I don't know.
I expect face paint, Ellen.
That's like an 8 p.m. decision. I guess we'll find out.
Well, let's jump into our matchup now between the Fighting Irish and Southern Cal. Let's start with the quarterback for Southern Cal.
Which one?
Keaton Slovis, the third quarterback they've used this year. They've
Yeah.
transitioned actually between 3 starters. They started the year with JT Daniels, then moved
Rip.
to Matt Fink, and now
He's not,
Keaton
he's
Slovis.
not dead. He's just injured.
Yeah.
For the record, Ellen saying rip means he's injured, not dead.
Yeah. Anyway.
Just a point of
and onto
clarification.
Slovis, who's a true freshman.
But wait, out for the season. So yeah, JT Daniels out.
So what does it mean now for USC to come into this game with Keaton Slovis? Can he live up to the environment at Notre Dame? This is, of course, in front of nearly 80,000 fans,
Yeah.
and probably the biggest matchup he's got left this year.
Here's what I will say about Slovis. I looked at his roster picture this morning on ESPN, and I honestly thought he looked like he was about 12 years old. So he's had I think he's got like a 5 touchdown, 4 pick ratio, which is really tough. Coming into a road game in Notre Dame Stadium at night against number 9 Notre Dame, these odds are just not stacked and are not with him at all. So
And you mentioned the 5 touchdown, 4 interception ratio, but their other option, Matt Fink, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, so even worse.
Yeah.
So I mean, it shows you that if this coaching staff and Helton decide, okay, we need to designate Slovis the starter for Notre Dame this week,
Yeah.
the true freshman quarterback, who, does not look like the most mature option that they have, it shows you that Fink has not been that guy for them this season. They gave him the chance, the junior quarterback, and now they chose to go with the freshman, who does look frazzled when he gets in these tough situations, and he doesn't really handle the pressure well. So if that Notre Dame line can pressure him as we would expect them to do, I don't anticipate him handling it that well.
And Caroline, how would you evaluate what Slovis has done to what JT Daniels has done in the past and what Fink did earlier this season?
I mean, it's tough to evaluate against JT Daniels because if he wasn't injured, he would be their starter right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
And
he
when you
was
lose
that
him in the
clear
first game of
starter
the
for
year.
them. Right, and you lose him immediately. So then Matt Fink coming in definitely underwhelmed. He was 40 for 62, 514 yards, but that 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions just never really gave that momentum. I mean, they lost to Washington 28-14. He didn't look good in that game. So when you drop a game like that to a Washington program that USC is expected to be better than, especially even coming into the season unranked, USC should have been able to beat Washington looking at like these rosters and how they match up against each other, and Fink just couldn't get the job done, and he just didn't look like a good quarterback. So you bring in Slovis, you take the chance on a freshman. I do think it's a smart move by Helton to take the chance on this guy if you know that Fink can't get it done for you, but it's still a gamble.
it's still a true freshman. I just think it's such a difficult environment to come to, especially when you're 18 years old. So.
Well, Ellen, they do have a couple of good wide receivers on the team. They got Michael Pittman, Tyler Vaughn, they're 2 leading wide receivers.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to help him out here?
I mean, Pittman certainly thinks he's going to be able to help him out. I don't know if you guys saw this quote, but he said, in reference to what he told his teammates earlier this week, I told him to embrace the suck, that it's going to be cold, but it'll be fun when we're running up the score. And I will say he's wrong for sure about one thing. It's not going to be cold. Because
is gonna
for
be cold, right?
Well, for South
For them,
Bend in
but
October.
for them it's going to be cold.
For them, it's going to be cold. But
I
for
think
us,
isn't it mid-40s, upper 40s?
It's
Maybe
53 is the
mid-50s.
high now.
But
During the
anyway,
game,
for
not now.
us, South Bend in October, that's nice weather. Honestly, maybe I'll be wearing a t-shirt and shorts.
I don't know. It was mid-80s on October 1st.
But I would say that he's definitely wrong about it being cold, and I'm going to say he's probably wrong about them running up the score because considering they couldn't beat Washington, I don't think they're going to be able to beat Notre
Or
Dame.
BYU. They also lost to BYU.
Yeah.
So a couple quality wins for them. They beat
Yeah,
Stanford
Stanford,
45-20. They beat number 10 Utah, 10 at the time, 30-23. And then they dropped one to Washington. They dropped one to BYU. This is just not a quality USC team. They're underperforming like they have a tendency to do. And, you know, I agree. Like, I think Pittman has a talent. He's one of the talented receivers.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. But it's not going to be enough. And also, like, I mean, talking that game, I think upset the Notre Dame players because the resounding response around the Notre Dame media community was, let's just wait and see how Notre Dame takes this. And I think they're going to take it out on the field. So that's not maybe something that Pittman should have said to anger them even more, but we'll see how it plays out.
The running back now for South Carolina, or Southern California, I should say. Both USC, but...
Not USC, Southern Cal. Southern Cal has like the official
Has
rights
the
to
I
go
trademark,
west.
I understand that, but they're both SC. Nonetheless, Vi Malapai, the running back for
Yeah.
USC, is he going to be able to make any inroads on this Notre
Well,
Dame
no,
front seven?
the receiving game has been the bread and butter of USC all season, so I think it's pretty surprising that their run game is as strong as it is. I think they're looking a lot better than anyone anticipated that they are. I know they favor the long ball, but they definitely can get things going on the ground if need be. That being said, they have not seen a line like Notre Dame's line. They have not seen a secondary like Notre Dame's secondary. I don't think that USC is going to be able to get very much going on offense either in the air or on the ground.
And I think with the turmoil at quarterback too, like these receivers haven't been able to really get used to any
Yeah.
one quarterback. I mean, they've seen 3 different guys this season. So when you have that turnover and you don't have the ability to really build that connection, especially even with a guy as talented as Pittman, you're going to need to rely on the run game more. And I think they're going to have to try to do that. And I do think the Notre Dame defense is going to be able to stifle that pretty early on.
Yeah.
As far as now Notre Dame's offense, what they're going to be able to do against the USC defense, what do you see for the Fighting Irish, especially in the running game? You talked a little bit about this earlier. Jafar Armstrong, Tony Jones Jr., how many reps does Jafar Armstrong get his first week back from injury?
Well, I think it'll be very interesting to see because Mike Young in his first week back, I think he had like 1 reception for -2 yards. So he obviously didn't get that much action. Again, it is against Bowling Green, but it will be interesting to see what Armstrong's role is this week. I could see him being the 2nd or 3rd guy in the lineup. I think it just depends how much they need them, or how much they need him. If they need him badly, I think he'll be getting more carries, but I could see him floating somewhere around like 6, 7, 8 carries, and Tony Jones really shouldering the load for the majority of the week. I think Notre Dame needs to have a breakout game on the ground, and we haven't seen that yet, and I think this is a great opportunity to have that.
Yeah, I think Jones is going to definitely have the chance to do more with Armstrong coming back. We don't want to ask him to do too much, especially because he is so injury prone. So I think it's going to be a gradual bringing him back. But like you said, if they get to a situation where Jones isn't getting it done and they need him, I would expect Armstrong to be asked to play more.
How important is the offensive line this week? They've had their ups and downs so far this season. I thought they had a pretty good game against Georgia, actually. A lot of other people disagreed. They've had their fair share of penalties. How well do they have to play against USC for the Irish to pick up a win?
I think well. I mean, I think I would disagree with you. I think the line did not look good against Georgia and all those penalties. And those can be attributed to different things, like the noise, Georgia's shifts. Like there were a lot of things that went into that. But to me, the line hasn't looked as strong as you would expect with 4 or 5 guys who started last year. So the freshman center was kind of that question mark. But really, it's been a couple of the other guys that have had some trouble with that too, and a couple of those false start penalties. So that's what a clean game, minimize penalties, minimize turnovers is what Notre Dame is going to need. And the O-line's a part of that, especially with those penalties.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important to protect the quarterback. I mean, a team against USC coming into Notre Dame Stadium, this is a rivalry game. Those guys want nothing more than to get to Ian Book and sack him as many times as possible. So if you're the offensive line, you really have to hold strong. Like we talked about earlier, you can't afford to lose Book. So the line is going to be critical, and if they can't get it done, then Book is at injury risk, and that's just not something that that's not an environment we can put ourselves in.
Well, now let's jump into predictions. The Fighting Irish, of course, taking on the USC and probably their 2nd hardest matchup remaining on their schedule. Possibly Stanford might be tough on the road to finish the season, but
Yeah.
this is going to be a big game for the Irish. What's your final score prediction, Caroline?
I'd predict a little bit of offensive woes at the beginning of the game, maybe a little bit of a slow start, and a final score of 28-17 Irish.
Pretty close.
Okay, I'm going to hover around that, but a little bit of a bigger spread. I'm going to say Notre Dame 35, USC 13.
Wow, okay. I'm going to close this thing out. Notre Dame wins this one 34-10 over USC. And stay tuned, though. We're finished with Shamrock Sports, but Inside the Irish is next with Chris Frick, just 20 minutes away. Thanks so much for watching Shamrock Sports.
All night, babe, make me wanna say